Hey guys! So in this video I want to just talk about how like everything happens for a reason and is essentially like all approved by God because it is all God, right? You know, light and dark are like two sides of the same coin sort of thing. And I know sometimes that can sound a little terrible, like, oh, what, like God allows all these awful things to happen. But I feel like it's more of a way of like we still do ultimately have free will to an extent, because we all kind of are who we are and are probably going to just like make the decisions we're going to make anyway, based on who we are. But we still do have free will to an extent, right? But yeah, I guess the best way like to describe it, I feel, you know, in life we have like good things happen, bad things happen, but it's almost like God obviously oversees the whole plan of life and like how things should be moving and where, like, you know, the chess pieces on the board should be, sort of thing, to eventually get to the whole complete picture. Kind of like how I've talked in one of my previous videos before of like the whole like tapestry idea, and it's kind of like, you know, on this side in life, when we're all here living our human lives, it's like we're all like a little thread of a tapestry. And when you look at the back of a tapestry, say for instance, it's like just like a messy thread of all these, you know, of all these threads like going everywhere, and it doesn't really make much sense. But then when you flip it over, it's like, oh, a beautiful picture that makes complete sense. And I feel like that's kind of the idea for when we go through these lives, and then we get to the other side and then we see, it all makes sense, and we're in heaven and it's all like da 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 da. But for a while we are on the messy side, you know, being these little threads. I feel like it's easy to kind of understand when bad things do happen or certain things happen. I feel like it's kind of a good way to think about it, kind of like, you know, like a pinball machine, and it's got the little do 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 do. So you can think of like good things happening is one little do do do, and the bad things happening is another little do do do, and they're kind of like working together to like move you along to like where you need to be, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so I guess, for example, it's all obviously very dependent on every situation, because there's so many possibilities and nuances, and everything like that, which is why it can make it easier the more in tune you are like with yourself, and more in tune, I guess, with like the energies of what is happening with you and around you. It can make it kind of easier to kind of see that picture and where it is all guiding you. You know, for example, you know, you might have like your car break down and you miss like a job interview or something, and that might seem really terrible, like you really wanted that job, but maybe it's because God knows that there's actually another job that's better for you that you should be doing instead, and it ends up being like a blessing in disguise in that way, you know. And like I feel like another aspect with like so many problems with like like in relationships or like family dynamics and stuff, where there's like so many issues that just keep repeating. And I feel like so often in society we think the best way is to you know, do what you can to kind of just accept those things and work on the situation and stay in that relationship or stay in that family dynamic, etc., etc. But sometimes it's almost like, well, maybe, you know, maybe God knows that you're actually not meant to be with that person, and that, you know, and then causes bad things to happen in the relationship so that you can separate and then be with the person you're meant to be with. Or maybe, you know, God even knows that you are meant to be together, but at the current time you just like aren't in the best like place developmentally to like make the relationship work really well. So you need some time apart to work on yourselves to then come back together. And obviously every situation's different, and usually the best way to tell if you're not sure at the time is with time. You know, you just issues in certain areas are happening, go with the flow of that. Try and see, like, you know, maybe I need to just take some space from this situation, and give yourself time to like evaluate and grow, and eventually you kind of will, hopefully, kind of work out where that is leading to you, where you're meant to be. You know, and sometimes as well, like, certain things also happen, or like, you know, certain even just like events that happen in your life, not necessarily situations with people, just to even like teach you things, or to help you grow developmentally into the sort of person, or to learn sort of, you know, develop certain attributes or strengths, or certain things within yourself to also help with your journey of where you're meant to be, to like make your life how God has it planned for you, you know? And I feel like that's how often we can get like trapped in these karmic loop cycles, or cycles of generational trauma, or, you know, all sorts of things. And so often we just try to like almost ignore the problems rather than seeing them as like an opportunity for growth, or an opportunity for change. Yes, that's why, you know, it is like best to just, as hard as it can be sometimes, to just like keep faith that things are happening for a reason, and that everything is like divinely orchestrated to get us silly little humans to, you know, where we need to be. And that's why I feel like eventually the better that we get at kind of recognizing these sort of things, accepting these sort of things, and going with the flow of, you know, the divine plan, eventually there doesn't need to be so much chaos to keep forcing us into these areas, because then instead we can just, from a little sign or a little like hint of a little touch of chaos, we can kind of you know, or like just a little tiny bad thing happening instead of heaps of bad things happening, we can go, oh, I see, like this is where God's like guiding me to go, or what God's guiding me to learn or overcome. And then it doesn't have to be so much chaos to get us to that realization, because we're a bit more in tune with the workings and the happenings of how it's all meant to unfold for us and those around us. And, you know, I think as well, that's why it's also important to, you know, have like acceptance of these sort of things, and like non-judgment for ourselves and others, because it is all divinely orchestrated, like as hard as that can be for us humans to see and understand sometimes. But that's why there really is, you know, nothing to like stress or worry too much about at the end of the day. You know, it's all part of God's plan. It's all part of, which is essentially our own plan for ourselves, that we've just are a bit out of touch with. But I feel like we're slowly, as, you know, humanity itself, we're just like developing our consciousness and awareness to these sort of things a bit more, and that's just gonna, you know, catapult even further and further as we move into the future, which means we'll like, hopefully, ideally, these sort of processes then will eventually become smoother once we kind of wake up to the happenings and realizations of like how and why it's happening. And I feel like that's kind of, you know, it kind of is like the bad things kind of are like a wake-up call, kind of like a little bell of like, hey, you need to like pay attention to something here. And, you know, sometimes that something can be hard to work out at the time, definitely. But in the meantime, if that part is hard for you to work out, at least just take some reassurance in knowing that God knows what he's doing, right? And eventually, I feel the more patience, faith, and acceptance you have for that, the easier it can be for that clarity to come to you as well. Like, you know, so often as humans, we get so attached to certain ways that we want things to go, or we can get a bit, you know, wanting control over how things should be or how they should unfold. rather than just kind of letting go and accepting, going with the flow, and just kind of seeing where it is that life is trying to direct us. And I feel like the quicker we kind of just like jump into that boat and flow down the river with life, the quicker things can just all smoothly come together. Whereas instead, at the moment, I feel like so many of us are like resisting even jumping in the boat, or like, no, we want that boat on it. But it's like we can't even see where the boats are taking us or where they're going, and we're just making these assumptions and judgments from our own like insecurities or our own just unknowing, our own unconscious state, you know. And I feel like that is why slowly things like through society have gotten better and will continue to get better as we like wake up more and more to that sort of process. And it's exactly like what I was saying before, you know, there really is no point in placing so much harsh judgment on others for bad things that happen, because it's happened for a reason, you know. And obviously, yes, like things still need to be addressed when bad things happen, but it doesn't need to be such like a doom and gloom, let's hang on to this for so long, or let's punish this person for so long, or let's, you know, worry about this for so long. And instead, like I said, seeing it more as like a little like doop, 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 trying to like move and navigate you through the river of life, getting you to the point of where you need to be. So like the less you resist, the less painful it's going to be in the end. You know, having trust in things like divine timing. Sometimes, you know, what we want isn't necessarily what we need. And it doesn't necessarily mean what you want isn't ever going to come. It just means maybe it's just not the right time right now. Like, you know, maybe God knows like when you get this thing later, then it's going to be so much better for you than if you had it right now. Or maybe God knows if you don't get this thing, then something else is going to come along that's even better. You know, like there's so many possibilities that we as humans currently are just like not as aware of, whereas God has like the whole picture and can see it all, and always has our best interest at heart, even as hard and harsh as things can be sometimes. Like quite honestly, like if I looked back on my life, there's so many terrible things that I could be, well, like even terrible's like a judgmental word, but you know, so many things that I could just be hung up on and be like, oh my God, like, you know, why, and, you know, hold resentment for, hold so much judgment for, you know, and then that's just like all these terrible feelings bogging me down. And for what point? Like everything that happens has gotten you to the place you are now. That's how we get to places. That's how we grow. That's how we evolve, through things happening. So it's kind of, you know, accepting that growth and change and evolution process of life and kind of embracing it as well, you know, and feel like the more you're able to embrace it, the more clarity you're going to get around it too. And then the more like fulfilling and exciting things can be, and less daunting and fearful things can be. So I guess, you know, is why it's always so important to just stay in that place of love over fear, because at the end of the day, it all is for love, and from God's love for us, for our benefit, as harsh as that can seem sometimes. And I feel like such like a, you know, good way to think about it as well is like, you know, we aren't fully evolved or grown yet, you know, and we always are growing and evolving in some aspect too. Like, you know, humans aren't just like the be all end all, and we aren't the only creatures in existence. Like, you know, we all are one, we all are everything. Everything is like God consciousness, just in different forms, right? Evolving and growing and experiencing life, you know, like lower animal forms and other animals like just are us essentially, you know, and God is essentially like a higher evolved state of us. Like it is all us connected as one, evolving through this process. And so if you think, you know, we are still kind of growing, we're like little seeds in the soil, you know, we were planted, especially if you think of humanity as a whole, like, you know, a seed that was planted right down, you know, in the deep, dark depths of the soil. And, you know, we have a lot of like wiggling in that darkness to move around, to grow, to eventually then sprout and pop out, you know. So it's kind of following the plan for your seed of where you need to go. Like, not only humanity itself are we growing, but we all are individually as well. And it's all like intricately, I can't even say that word, you know what I'm saying, connected to bloom into like this beautiful, I guess, like tree of life that we're all a part of and becoming. You know, like if, you know, possibly if certain things didn't occur in your life, then you wouldn't have the strength or stability that you have now. If certain things didn't happen in your life, then maybe you wouldn't be in the place you are right now. You might not be around the certain great friends that you have now. You might not be living in a certain location that you love now. You might not be in the perfect relationship that you have now. Like, there's so much good that can come from the bad. And sometimes without the bad, we don't get to the good, right? So yeah, as hard as it can be to accept sometimes from our human ego states, it really is all divinely orchestrated in that way. And I know it's definitely easier to just say these things, and a lot harder to actually implement and accept such things. Absolutely. But I feel the more that you're able to do that, the easier it becomes. And then the easier that life becomes for you too, the more that you're able to just sort of accept those things, and kind of practice getting that kind of bigger picture view, just the more calm and clarity it can bring for yourself. So yeah, just remember, you know, have faith that everything is divinely working out as it's meant to for you. You know, trusting that God does love you, and terrible things are, you know, happening for a reason, whether it be like a wake-up call that you need to take a new approach, to, you know, learn something, to like develop more, you know, strength or discernment or something like that within yourself, or whether it's to, you know, steer you from one part of life to a new part of life, whether it's to give you a pause to work on things so that part of your life can remain intact. You know, like for example, maybe if something bad didn't happen, and you stayed in a certain situation, then something even worse would happen later. And so that something bad happened can give you a reprieve, a break for clarity, to avoid even worse things happening, you know? So it might seem like, oh my God, this terrible thing happened, but it could have been to save you from even more terrible things. Like, there's just so many possibilities. But when you really do able to have that bigger picture view, it really does make sense. And I feel like that's why so many like near-death experiences and, you know, psychic messages and things like that really do say, like, when you get to the other side, like everything just makes sense and everyone's like, oh, there was nothing to even worry about. Like, oh, what was I so stressed about? What was I, you know, wasted all my time in life being stressed or worried about this. And it's like, it was all happening for a divine reason, and everything like works out in the end. Especially when we do think of the aspect of heaven, and like it's like we're not just living these lives, you know, going through certain moments of misery or whatever, and then, you know, we die and then that's it. It's like, you know, all for nothing. It's all for something. It's all for not only the development of ourselves and each other, and the lives we're currently living, but also like for the like development of heaven itself and our heaven experiences. So sometimes we also need to go through these sort of situations and learn certain lessons and learn certain things that we do like, don't like, meet certain people, you know, experience certain like hobbies or activities or just so many things, just to even discover and fully get in touch with who and what we are, so that we can have a fantastic heaven experience. Because if you were just like plopped into like a perfect heaven state, like as your first experience of awareness, and everything was fine and there was nothing bad, then you wouldn't really even have the understanding to grasp that you are in heaven and what's so good about it, because it would just be a normal, it is what it is. Whereas going through these lives and these experiences, it can teach us so many things, gives us so much depth, you know, even just depth of emotion and depth of understanding, and gives us an ability to have things to be excited for, or things that we don't necessarily like, so that when we do have a more heaven experience, it's like we're able to really appreciate and understand the value behind all of that. And I feel like that's the whole kind of point for eventually having a more like heaven on earth type experience, is when we do evolve to a more higher state of being and a more, you know, connected to God and, you know, source energy type way of like consciousness and living. Then there doesn't need to be so many chaotic things to get our unconscious selves to where we need to be. Instead, it can just maybe be just a little push, and then we're like, oh, we see the bigger picture. Yep, I'm on it. This way, you know. And then so things don't have to be so harsh moving forward either. So that's like positive. But, you know, sometimes it takes, because we are kind of essentially like created, it seems like, at least for humans, going back in time, you know, we were more and more like in an unconscious, you know, more asleep sort of state. And then, you know, more of these chaotic things happen that kind of wake us up to this awareness more and more and more, so that we're able to like adjust quicker and easier without needing so much chaos to get us there. So yeah, so just if you are, you know, struggling with things that are happening now or things that have happened in the past, just trying to really, as hard as it can be sometimes, just trying to see the kind of the bigger picture view and what that could and does like mean for you, your experience and your journey, and having faith that it is divinely orchestrated by God, and kind of, you know, trying to be more in tune with how that would be to kind of bring yourself some clarity on that, because ultimately you're the person that's going to know the most, because you know yourself and your journey the most. You know, like there's so many experiences, opportunities, people like in the world, like, you know, essentially infinite. So for us to just think that, you know, the first person we date, or the first job we have, or, you know, the first place we live, location we live, or whatever is going to be, you know, the place for us, isn't necessarily the case. But so often we get so attached to things, or want to control things a certain way and think, you know, we want this, we want that. But sometimes there is like a bigger picture plan for it all, and in the end it is gonna be better for you. As hard as that can be to sometimes accept in the moment, you know, like there's infinite time, we're like eternal, infinite beings. So there is such like more going on than just what you feel like you might want right now. Sometimes it's about what you need right now to get even more of what you want later. Because sometimes maybe getting what you want right now would sabotage even better things down the line. So yeah, just having faith and trust in your own journey, your own process, and just trying your best, as hard as it can be, to, you know, just have acceptance and non-judgment for any things happening to your life, to others around the world, and just kind of trying to really accept that it is all part of a divinely orchestrated plan. And the less we try to like control or like judge or criticize those things, the less like stress and unnecessary like emotions and burden we're going to place on ourselves. So yeah, I hope that makes some sort of sense and helps someone along on their journey. Yeah, sending you so much love, peace, light, and blessings.